How did the ancient Chinese people create the characters? Were there methods and patterns? How did the characters change their look through different stages in history? Were there deeper meanings behind those characters? You will get answers in this episode, and you will be able to read some of the ancient scripts. We will get a better understanding of the ancient people's life and minds. Now, let's wind the clock back and go back to 4,000-5,000 years ago to meet a man from the legend. Cang Qie. He was a historian, and he was also believed as the first person to ever create Chinese scripts. Before him, people already used ropes to note things down. They made knots on the ropes in order to remind themselves what type of events it is and how important they were. Big knots for more important things, small knots for minor details, and link the ropes if the events were related. As the society moved forward, such way of noting things down was clearly not enough. Cang Jie decided to create something that could represent more complicated information and could be communicated within larger populations. He looked around. He must be a good observer, as he was four-eyed. The nature inspired him. The sun, moon, the sky, the shape of mountain and water, and the fish swimming inside. He came up with the signs and symbols, and he went around the people to test if they understood it. This was just a legend. However, pictograms of these objects were found on Jia Gu Wen, known to the world as oracle bone scripts. Scripts carved on turtle shells. Jia Gu Wen, evidence of the earliest Chinese scripts, and they were around 3,500 years old. The contents there were basically about prediction of the future, seeking answers from the gods by reading the cracks on the shells. Such scripts developed and evolved into different kinds of shapes among different tribes and kingdoms, until 1,000 years later, the first emperor of China united all these different ways of writing into one type. That is called Xiao Zhuan. And during these 1,003 years of history, most of the characters we used on a day-to-day basis was already created. And through reading these pictogram scripts, we could figure out the methods they used. And the first type were these pictograms at the very beginning to symbolize different objects in their surroundings. But this method had two shortcomings. They could only describe nouns. There was a need to describe actions and using adjectives too. Then they start to use pictograms and bring them into one, typically two into one. For example, 采, which means to pick fruits or flowers, look like this. Two components, a hand at the top and the plants at the bottom. 手 plus 目. Another one, 析, which means to analyze as the meaning of today, used to look like this. A tool like axe to cut the wood. Just the way we analyze things, breaking complicated information down and check the details. There were quite some characters created with 人, people, as one of the components, such as 休, to rest, a person leaning on tree during breaks of work in the day, or 信, which means to trust, a person and his talks, his speech. If a man can keep his words, then he can be trusted. 人 back then and now look quite different, right? That is the image of a man in this position, half bowed, polite, and humble. Therefore, in the character of 人, which means being kind, having sympathy, compassion for the others, as you can see R on the right side, which represents every two people between each other. I should treat you in the way I want to be treated. That's the meaning of the character. 人. And if the relationship between every two people in one society is like this, then we will have a perfect world. And that was the essence of Confucius' thoughts and theory about what a society should be. Big message in a simple character, isn't it? The second shortcoming of pictogram method was that it wasn't so easy to point out which part on which object. For example, 刀, which means knife, did look like a knife. And how did they say about the blade? They put a point there. Then it's another character, 刃, blade, the side for cutting. When I was little, I thought, oh, maybe that was blood, so sharp that I cut myself and bleed. The same way they created others. Or take 木, tree, for another example. At a stick at the bottom, we have 本, which means the root, the base. And move the stick to the top, then we have 末, that means the last part of an object. There's an old saying, 本末倒置, upside down, put the carriage before the horse. It's suggesting that things should be done the other way around. 本末倒置. Take 上 and 下, for example. They look like these at that time. Take a horizontal line. What is above is 上, and what is below is 下. Easy, wasn't it? Using these two methods, they were able to create double the amount of characters than the very first method. But again, all of these great methods came into a bottleneck as the human society evolves. A lot more stuffs were invented, and they had better and deeper understanding of the things around them, about the nature. And then they used the fourth method. One part represents the category, give hints to the meaning, and the other part responsible for the sound. This method boomed. The possibility of creating new characters were endless. Take animals, for example. At the very beginning, they just say 鸟, birds, for those flying in the skies, or simply those have wings. And later on, they found different species. Hence, we had 鸡, chicken, 鸭, duck, 鹅, goose, 鸽, doves. Similarly, 鱼, fish, for those swimming in the water. Therefore, even 鲨, sharks, and 鲸, whales, were also created in the same pattern, even though technically they belong to a totally different species. 狼, wolf, 猪, pig, 猴, monkey, they share the same component, which comes from dog. 犬, as they were called in the ancient times, and this became a radical for mammals walking on four legs. 虫 is for insects, hence they created 蝴蝶, butterflies, 蜻蜓, dragonflies, 蚂蚁, ants, and even spiders, 蜘蛛, small-sized reptiles as well, 蜥蜴, lizards. We can see how their understandings of the plants had deepened as well. The ones that are short and grow quite close to the ground, they called it 草. The ones that are much taller, trees. The ones that are strong but flexible, that could be used as building material, and handcrafting for household use, they are bamboos, 竹. And most importantly, the ones that they can grow on the field and later on reap for food, such as grains and wheat, they're in the group of 禾. They were able to tell the differences between these plants and give them names. And these names, in the stage of the fourth method, became radicals in order to create a lot more species. The grass radical were also for a lot of flowers, and the herbal medicines. 花, flowers. 药, herbal medicines. Using bamboo radical they created 笔, the writing tool, or a basket for carrying around. 篮, basket, for 禾, the crops. We have 秋, autumn, the season for harvest. And even 税, taxes, because the farmers have to give the regime a part of the products from their field as taxes. As for the trees, the family is even bigger. I have an episode about that if you are interested. Looking back into the history of the scripts, a lot of things start to make sense. The measure word, for example. Have you ever wondered why we say 头 as the measure word for cattle and sheep? Simply because their heads were cut off to sacrifice the gods people worship and the ancestors they respect. Even their characters were just pictures of their head. 一头羊, 一头牛, one single piece of them. By checking the characters, we can also find that there are hundreds of characters with a woman radical, but there were very little mention about man. 男, the males, was a combination of symbols with the farming tool at the bottom and the field at the top, the labor on the farm. 男. As for women, we have the terms for almost all the female members of a big family. 妈, mother. 姑,姨, that's how we call the aunts from either side of our parents. 婆, mother-in-law, and so on. And even 婚姻, marriage. Both characters are made of this component. What I can see from this phenomenon was that a lot of attention was given to women through the history of a character creation, that they played a lot of different roles in the society. Some words are positive, some words are negative. But their actions, their importance were all kept down in the forms of different scripts. All what I've been talking about could be found in this book. 说文解字, which means explaining the scripts and characters back to their origins. This book is 2,000 years old and is considered the first dictionary in the Chinese history and even around the world. There were over 9,000 Chinese characters collected in this book, and the author, Xu Shen, a historian in the Han Dynasty. And he used 小篆 this way of writing to trace back their original meanings. 小篆 was the turning point from the ancient way of scripts towards the modern way of writing. After that, people care more about the styles of the writing, how to write it conveniently, and also keep the elegance. And slowly, all the Chinese character has the shape of a square, and they lost a lot of features of the pictograms. That's why it's hardly to see what it was, just looking at today's characters. That's all for today. I have an album of different radicals representing different meanings with a lot of character examples. Check them if you are interested. Have a nice day. 再见!